줄리터너 북한 인권특사가 지난 10일 윈미디어를 방문했습니다. 북한 인권 옹호의 중요성과 재미산 가족의 상봉을 실현시키기 위해 앞으로 최대한의 노력을 기울일 것이라고 말했습니다. 윈미디어를 방문한 줄리터너를 지금부터 만나봅니다.
시청자 여러분, 안녕하세요. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Win TV. Today we have with us a very special guest at our studio, someone who does very important work on behalf of both Korean and American nationals. 줄literner, Special Envoy on North Korea human rights issues for the U.S. Department of State. Thank you so much for being with us today, Julie.
Thank you for having me.
I wanted to start off and just ask if you could introduce yourself to our viewers and tell them a little bit more about what you do.
My name is 줄리터너, and I am the U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues. In this role, I work to promote human rights and the dignity of the North Korean people.
Very amazing work. Thank you so much. I know that you're in Chicago for a short time, very short time in fact. Could you tell us more about what you're doing here, if it's for work or if you're just here?
Yes, I am here just visiting Chicago.
Sure.
But I am also using this time to meet with members of divided families, individuals who may have family members remaining in North Korea who were separated from their loved ones during the Korean War.
Sure, okay, very good. I know before your confirmation as Special Envoy, you pledged to focus on 5 key areas if appointed. And I know that the 5th of these was engaging with the Korean community, kind of as you said, to identify divided families. I heard you're also planning on meeting with members of divided families at your office in Washington, D.C., coming up here on the 21st, I believe. Could you tell me more about that meeting and what it signifies?
Yes, so one of the 5 key priorities for me in my time in this role will be seeking to advocate on behalf of Americans who are in this category of people that we classify as divided families. As I mentioned, families divided by the Korean War.
Sure.
I think that this particular community is not only aging, but also one of the groups that are particularly victimized by the North Korean government's
Absolutely.
human rights abuses. The North Korean government's extreme restrictions on the movement of its citizenry are what prevent individuals from being able to be reunited with their loved ones. And they use these measures as a coercive practice, also to leverage the international community and government's policies towards the North Korean government.
Sure. Very good. So I know that some have argued that when negotiating with North Korea, the negotiations on the country's human rights atrocities that you mentioned and denuclearization are sort of mutually exclusive. There's something that can't be talked about at the same time. Do you believe that their weapons programs and human rights violations are linked? And do you believe it's possible for the U.S. to discuss both issues to North Korea with North Korea at the same time? Or do you believe that can't be possible for us at this point?
I do believe that the two issues are inextricably linked.
Okay.
And this is a policy that the U.S. government has spoken out clearly about
Sure.
as recently as at the August UN Security Council session that focused on North Korea's human rights abuses. I do think that the U.S. government and other governments around the world can talk about the weapons program and human rights at the same time.
Okay.
We are capable of multitasking,
Sure.
and I hope that we do more of that with North Korea.
Absolutely. You stated that you had spent the last 2 decades, this was really poignant to me, quote, promoting human rights not just as U.S. values, but as critical interests directly tied to national security. Thought that was really important. Could you tell us why you feel that this is true, especially now as you begin this position as Special Envoy?
Absolutely. And this goes back to the last question
Sure.
of these issues and whether or not they're linked.
Right.
North Korea exploits its people to build its WMD program, either through mass mobilizations, sometimes that involve children, school children in North Korea, or through the exportation of workers overseas. And those workers oftentimes work in egregious conditions, 18 hours a day, in order to generate revenue that then goes back to the regime.
Right.
And they use that on things such as a weapons program, as opposed to using it to feed their own people.
Sure.
And I think that's a perfect example of where human rights tie in directly to national security interests.
Absolutely.
Because from a U.S. perspective, obviously, we have a direct interest in what the North Korea's efforts in that nuclear space are. And so addressing the human rights abuses there not only is something that we can and should do because the U.S. and Americans value human rights, but also because there is a direct tie-in to the weapons program.
Can you tell us more about what you are aware of with this situation and how, if at all, your work is related to those people?
Absolutely. So there are reports that as the North Koreans have reopened their border post-COVID, that the PRC government has begun repatriating North Koreans back to North Korea. And we believe that many of those individuals, or some number of those individuals, are being forcibly returned.
Okay.
They were asylum seekers, or in some instances, they were mothers who had married Chinese men who are now being separated not only from their husbands, but from their children as well, and forced to go back to North Korea. Where, as you mentioned, the conditions that they face are quite severe,
Right.
Particularly for North Koreans who have been overseas that have had contact with South Koreans or other foreigners who have consumed large amounts of foreign media. We find that those conditions are even harsher. And some of these things can include torture.
Sure.
Some of these can include gender-based violence. And in some extreme instances, include summary executions.
Really? Okay.
And so the United States continues to call upon all governments to abide by the principle of non-refoulement and to provide protection where and when governments can to these individuals seeking asylum.
So you're a very important part of that, it sounds like. Very, very good. I wonder, just to wrap up, this is on a more personal note, what does this position mean to you personally as a South Korean adopted into the United States?
So this position has been really meaningful for me because in this role I am able to represent the American people.
Right.
And as an adoptee in my adopted country who gave me loads of opportunity, really, I have been able to excel in my field, and now I have the opportunity to give back to the country that gave me so much. It's also particularly meaningful because it has a linkage to my heritage country.
Sure.
And so I also find it particularly meaningful every time I step off the plane in Seoul, every time that I get to meet with other members of the Korean diaspora, and to feel an inherent connection.
Sure, of course, yeah. Wow, that's very special. Well, I really want to thank you so much, Ms. Turner, on behalf of both personally myself and our whole team for coming here. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you.